Captain David Morris had been staring at the same communication screen for 3 hours. The message from the Valorian Empire was simple and direct and terrifying. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction. The message played on repeat in every language that Earth knew, and some that it didn't. The United Earth Coalition had gone into emergency session. Nations that had been enemies for centuries suddenly sat at the same table, trying to figure out how to respond to an alien threat that could wipe them out with the push of a button. David Morris was chosen to lead a small diplomatic mission because he had a reputation for staying calm when everything around him was falling apart. He was a man with gray starting to show in his dark hair, with eyes that had seen too much of space and not enough of home. His team consisted of Karen White, a tactical officer who had grown up in military families and knew 17 languages, and Dr. Marcus Lee, who had spent his entire career studying alien biology through telescopes and satellites, and now would finally see an actual alien face to face. The transport pod descended through the purple clouds of Kepler-7, and David felt his stomach twist with nerves. He had commanded ships through asteroid fields and navigated through radiation storms. But this felt different. This felt like walking into a trap with both eyes open. Karen sat across from him, checking weapons that they both knew would be useless against a civilization advanced enough to threaten an entire planet. Marcus was reading through files on his tablet. Information gathered from long-distance observation of the Valorian vessels. None of it was encouraging. The ship in orbit was the size of a small moon. The technology on board was centuries beyond anything humanity had managed to create. And somewhere down on the planet below was a leader who had threatened to destroy everything David had ever known. The landing platform was empty and vast and cold. It stretched out like a black mirror under a crimson sky. David stepped out of the transport pod first, feeling the alien air on his skin for the first time. It was dry and hot with a taste like metal and burning wood. He was taking his first steps forward when he heard the sound. It started as a low rumble and became a sonic wave that made his teeth vibrate. Then she appeared. The Valorian Queen was nothing like the simulations and models had predicted. She was enormous, standing nearly 8 feet tall with skin that glowed pale blue in the light of the red sky. She had 4 arms, each one more muscular and powerful looking than a human could imagine. Her face was sharp and beautiful and utterly alien, with eyes that were completely black like looking into the void of space itself. Her name was Vex, and she had ruled the Valorian Empire for 500 years. She had conquered 12 star systems and brought 47 alien civilizations under her control. She had never met a species that could challenge her authority, and she certainly did not expect to meet one now. Vex looked at David the way someone might look at an insect that had just crawled across their floor. Her expression was one of pure contempt mixed with mild curiosity. When she spoke, her voice was like breaking glass and distant bells ringing all at once, but her English was perfect. "How amusing," she said. "The weak little humans send one of their kind to speak for all of them. I had expected more ceremony. I had expected a show of force. Instead, you send me a tiny, fragile creature who looks like it might break if I sneeze too hard. Your courage is impressive in its absolute futility." David stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands open and visible. He had trained for this moment for weeks, but no amount of training could prepare him for the reality of standing in front of an ancient alien queen who looked at his entire species as beneath her notice. "My name is David Morris," he said, keeping his voice level and calm. "I am the representative of the United Earth Coalition. I come to request a meeting not as a servant but as an equal. We have a proposal that might interest you." Vex laughed, and the sound was like nothing David had ever heard before. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. "Equal," she repeated through her laughter. "You believe that we are equals. The Valorian Empire spans across multiple star systems. We have technology that your species will not understand for another 1,000 years. We have warriors who could crush an entire army with their bare hands. And you, little human, you think you stand as an equal to me. You think your words matter? You think your proposal might interest a being of my power and authority? Come here. Let me show you something." David moved forward, though every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run. Vex reached out with one of her upper hands and grabbed his collar. She lifted him off the ground as if he weighed nothing at all. His feet dangled in the air, and he could feel the strength in her grip, the absolute certainty that she could crush him instantly if she wanted to. She brought his face close to hers, and he could see the patterns on her skin shifting through colors. They were blue now, the color of anger and superiority. "Your proposal is irrelevant," she whispered, her black eyes staring directly into his. "Your species is irrelevant. In 1 week we will begin the bombardment of your world. Within a month Earth will be ours. Your people will either serve us or die. It matters very little to me which path you choose. Now watch what happens when you insult the Valorian Empire by suggesting we are equals." She threw him. David flew backward across the platform, his body slamming hard against the cold metal. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he felt at least 2 ribs crack under the force. He lay there gasping, unable to breathe, unable to move. His vision started to go dark at the edges. Karen was moving forward, her hand reaching for her weapon, but David managed to raise his other hand and signal her to stop. If they opened fire on the Queen, the entire diplomatic mission would end in their deaths within seconds. David pushed himself up slowly, each movement sending waves of pain through his body. Blood dripped from his nose, staining the black platform red. He looked up at the Queen, and instead of fear in his eyes, there was something else. There was amusement. He was hurt and broken and outmatched in every possible way, and yet he was smiling. He was actually laughing. The sound echoed across the platform, and Vex went completely still. Every Valorian warrior watching from the distance seemed to hold their breath. "You know what I think," David said through his laughter, his voice hoarse from pain. "I think you are more powerful than me. I think your technology is superior to ours. I think your warriors could destroy our armies. But I also think that you are afraid. I think you have never met anyone who refused to break under your power, and that frightens you more than anything else in this universe ever could. You rule through fear and dominance because you have never learned how to do anything else." The Valorian Queen's entire body went rigid. Her skin patterns flashed through every color of the spectrum. Her 4 hands clenched into fists. The sound that came from her mouth was not words. It was a sonic pulse that threw David across the platform again, this time with enough force that his world went black before he even hit the ground. The last thing he heard was Karen White screaming his name and the distant sound of Valorian warriors moving closer. Then there was nothing but darkness and silence and the feeling of falling through an endless void. David Morris woke to the sound of distant machinery humming. His entire body felt like it had been put through a press and flattened into something that barely resembled a human being. His ribs sent sharp waves of pain through his chest every time he breathed. His left eye was swollen shut and he could taste blood in his mouth. He tried to move but found that he was lying on a cold metal floor in what appeared to be some kind of holding cell. The walls around him were transparent crystal that glowed with a soft blue light. Through the walls he could see a massive chamber beyond, filled with Valorian warriors who moved with purpose and grace. Some of them stopped to look at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to hunger. Karen and Marcus were gone. David had no way of knowing if they were alive or dead or somewhere in between. He tried to stand but fell immediately, his body too damaged to support his weight. He lay there on the floor, staring up at a ceiling that seemed impossibly high, and wondered if this was how it was going to end. He had come to make peace, and instead, he had started a war with his own mouth. He had insulted the most powerful being in the known universe, and now humanity would pay the price for his arrogance. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. David lost track of time in the pale blue glow of his cell. The light never changed. There was no sun rising or setting. There was just the endless glow and the constant pain, and the knowledge that everything he had done had led to complete failure. He tried to think of ways to fix this, ways to salvage the situation, but there was nothing. The Queen wanted conquest, not negotiation. Humanity was going to fall, and it was going to be because of one man's pride. Then the cell door opened. David tensed, expecting warriors coming to move him or execute him or do something else entirely. Instead, it was the Queen herself who stepped inside. But she was different now. She was smaller, her form compressed somehow, bringing her down to only 7 feet tall instead of the 8 feet she had been before. Her silver patterns glowed with a soft purple light instead of the aggressive colors from before. She looked almost sad, if an alien being could look sad. She told David to sit up if he could, and he managed to push himself into a sitting position, using the crystal wall for support. Vex sat across from him, her forearms folded in a way that David recognized as a non-threatening pose. She told him that she had been reviewing recordings of human history. She had watched wars and revolutions and the rise and fall of human civilizations. She had watched humans fight each other with primitive weapons. She had watched them struggle and suffer and refused to quit even when victory seemed impossible. She said that her scientists had told her that humans were physically weaker than almost every other species in the universe. But that was not what the recordings showed. The recordings showed a species that was driven by something else entirely, something that transcended physical strength. David listened but said nothing. He was trying to figure out if this was another test, another way to break his spirit before they destroyed his world. Vex continued speaking. She told him that she had ruled the Valorian Empire for 500 years. She had conquered every enemy she had ever faced through superior force and superior technology. She had never met anyone who was not intimidated by her power. She had never met anyone who challenged her not with weapons but with words, with attitude, with absolute refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of certain annihilation. Then Vex made him an offer. It was an offer that she seemed to find both amusing and deadly serious. She said that she wanted to make a wager, a contest of strength and will. If David could defeat her in single combat, then humanity would be left alone. The Valorian Empire would leave Earth and never return. Humanity would be recognized as equals in the galactic community. But if Vex defeated him, then Earth would become a slave world, and David would become her personal servant for the rest of his life. She would keep him alive long enough to watch his entire civilization fall under her control. David's first instinct was to refuse. He knew it was likely a trap. He knew that Vex was infinitely stronger and faster and more powerful than any human could ever be. He knew that a fight between them would not be a fight. It would be an execution. But then he realized something. This was not about winning. This was about showing her something that she had never seen before. This was about proving to her that humans would fight even when the odds were completely impossible. This was about making her understand that no matter how strong she was, she could never break the human spirit. So David said yes. He told Vex that he accepted her terms. He told her that he would fight her and that he would do everything in his power to defeat her. Vex smiled, and it was a smile that contained both respect and pity in equal measure. She told him that she liked his courage, even if that courage was likely to get him killed. She told him that the fight would take place in the great arena, where thousands of her people would watch. She told him that win or lose, she would personally escort David back to Earth after the contest was complete. David was escorted through corridors of the Valorian city, past warriors and scientists and beings that he could not identify or classify. He was taken to quarters where he was given time to rest and heal. Medical technology that was far beyond anything Earth had developed was used to repair his broken ribs and reduce the swelling in his face. By the time he was ready, David looked almost like himself again. Almost, but not quite. There was something different in his eyes now. There was a determination that had not been there before, a clarity of purpose that came from someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. He knew he was going to lose the fight, but he also knew that losing was not the same as giving up. Losing was just what happened at the end of the battle. Giving up was what happened in the mind before the battle ever started. And David Morris had made a decision. He was not going to give up. Not now, not ever. The Great Arena was the most impressive structure that David Morris had ever seen. It was a massive circular chamber carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The walls rose up into darkness so complete that David could not see the ceiling even though he knew there must be one. Around the arena, thousands of seats rose in tiers that stretched impossibly high. Almost every seat was filled with Valorian warriors and nobility and scientists, all of them waiting to watch the contest between their queen and a tiny human who had dared to insult her. The sound of their anticipation filled the arena like a physical presence. David stood on one side of the arena, watching the Valorians file into their seats. His body felt strange, caught between the healing of alien technology and the natural injury that still lingered underneath. He could breathe without pain now, but he could still feel weakness in his bones, a reminder that he was not at full strength. He wore no armor and carried no weapons. Vex had made it clear that weapons would not be allowed. This was a test of pure strength and will and strategy. Karen White sat somewhere in the crowd. David had seen her briefly before the fight, brought into the arena by guards who seemed to think it was amusing to show her that her captain was about to be destroyed. She looked angry and determined, her eyes burning with the kind of focus that David recognized. She was already planning how to escape, how to rescue him if he survived this encounter. Marcus was there too, though David did not see him in the crowd. The scientist was probably being kept in a separate location, probably being studied by Valorian researchers who were fascinated by the alien human physiology. The queen entered from the opposite side of the arena. She was in her full form now, towering 8 feet tall with her 4 powerful arms and her skin glowing with bright blue patterns. She moved with absolute confidence, the kind of certainty that came from 500 years of never losing a fight. She looked down at David, and even from across the arena he could see the amusement in her black eyes. She seemed to be enjoying this. She seemed to think that this was going to be entertaining. A Valorian announcer, a tall being with silver skin instead of blue, called out in a language that David somehow understood. Perhaps the Valorians had implanted something in his mind before bringing him to the arena. The words echoed across the chamber. This is a contest of strength between the Valorian Empire's supreme leader, Queen Vex the Conqueror, and the human representative, David Morris. If the human wins, Earth will be declared a free world and recognized as equals in the galactic community. If the Queen wins, the human will become her personal servant and Earth will be enslaved. Let the contest begin. Vex moved first, her massive form crossing the arena in seconds. She was so fast that David almost did not have time to get out of the way. Her fist came down where he had been standing, and the impact created a crack in the black stone floor. The sound of the impact echoed across the arena like thunder. David rolled to the side, feeling the heat of her body as she passed him. He was already moving, already planning his next action, but his body felt slow compared to hers. For the first hour, Vex toyed with him. She moved with the kind of control and precision that showed she was not even close to using her full power. She would swing at him with one of her 4 arms, and he would barely dodge out of the way. She would kick at him, and he would roll backward. She seemed to be testing him, learning his patterns, figuring out how a human moved and thought and reacted. The crowd roared with laughter as David was knocked down repeatedly. He would get back up, his muscles screaming with pain, and he would continue to fight. He did not land a single blow on her. He could not. She was too fast, too strong, too perfectly adapted for combat. But something changed in the second hour. David's body began to remember the training that had been drilled into him for decades. His movements became less reactive and more proactive. He started to anticipate Vex's attacks instead of just responding to them. He could not match her strength, but he could match her strategy. When she threw a punch, he would slip inside her guard and use her own momentum against her. When she tried to grab him, he would twist and slide away. He was not winning, but he was surviving. More than that, he was adapting. Vex's patterns began to change color. They shifted from blue to purple to red as she grew more serious about the combat. She started using more of her power, more of her speed. Her attacks became faster and more dangerous. David had learned to read her movements, to understand the language of her body. But now she was moving faster than he could possibly track. He took hits that should have killed him. His body was covered in bruises and cuts. Blood dripped down his face again, mixing with sweat. But David was thinking about something that Vex did not understand. He was thinking about humanity's greatest wars and greatest victories. He was thinking about generals who had won against impossible odds. He was thinking about soldiers who had held their ground when they should have been destroyed. He was thinking about a simple truth that the Valorian Empire had forgotten. Physical strength was not the only kind of strength that mattered. Determination and will and the absolute refusal to give up were also forms of strength. In the third hour, exhaustion began to set in. The Valorian queen was faster and stronger than David, but she had not fought a real battle in centuries. She had conquered through overwhelming force, through the simple application of her superior power. She had never had to push herself to the limit. David, on the other hand, had been pushing himself to the limit his entire career. He knew how to breathe through pain. He knew how to think clearly, even when his body was screaming at him to quit. He knew how to keep moving forward even when moving forward seemed impossible. Vex began to slow down, just barely, just imperceptibly to anyone who was not looking for it. But David was looking. David was always looking. He was waiting for the moment when her perfect control would slip for just a second. He was waiting for the opening that would change everything. The moment came when David did not expect it to come. It was not the moment he had been waiting for consciously, but it was the moment that his body and mind had been preparing for throughout the entire fight. Vex had just thrown a punch with her upper left arm, a powerful strike that was meant to catch David off guard. But David had learned her patterns well enough to know what was coming before it came. He had learned that after an attack from her upper left arm, she always followed with an attack from her lower right arm. It was a pattern, a habit, the kind of unconscious movement that warriors developed after centuries of absolute dominance. David did not dodge the first punch. Instead, he stepped into it, using the force of the impact to move his body backward and to the side. The punch grazed his shoulder instead of hitting him square in the chest. It was a small adjustment, but it was enough, because in that moment, in that fraction of a second when Vex was committed to her upper left arm's attack, David stepped inside her guard. He moved into the space between her forearms, into the place where none of them could hit him effectively. For just a moment he was safe. For just a moment he had neutralized her greatest advantage. The Queen seemed surprised by this maneuver. David could see it in her black eyes. The sudden shift from certainty to something that looked almost like respect. But there was no time for thought. There was only action. David grabbed one of her lower arms with both of his hands and twisted with everything that he had left in his body. He twisted with his entire life behind it, with the knowledge that this was the only chance he was going to get. He twisted with the determination of a species that had nothing left to lose. And something happened that had never happened to the Valorian Queen before in her 500 years of life. Vex fell. She lost her balance and fell down onto one knee. The impact of her massive body hitting the ground created a shockwave that made David stumble backward. The sound echoed across the arena and was met with absolute silence. No Valorian was laughing anymore. No one was cheering. The entire arena had gone completely quiet because something impossible had just happened. Vex rose to her feet, and David could see that her patterns were flashing through colors so quickly that they seemed to blur. She looked at him and he could see something new in her eyes. It was not anger, though there was certainly anger there. It was recognition. It was the acknowledgement that David Morris was not just a tiny, fragile human who could be crushed with a thought. He was something else. He was a warrior. He was a being who refused to break no matter how much force was applied. He was a being who could adapt and learn and ultimately survive. Vex came at him again, but this time the nature of the fight had changed. She was no longer testing him. She was no longer playing with him. She was fighting him with a seriousness that made the earlier exchanges seem like warm-ups. She moved faster than before, her attacks more powerful, her focus more intense, but David was ready. His body had learned to anticipate her movements, to read the subtle shifts in her posture that indicated what she was going to do next. They fought across the arena, and for the first time David landed blows. Not many. Not enough to damage her significantly, but enough to show that he could hurt her if he wanted to. Enough to show that he was more than just a fragile creature to be destroyed. The fight lasted 5 more hours. The Valorian crowd became more and more engaged as time went on. They stopped laughing at the human and started watching him with genuine interest. They were watching one of their greatest warriors fight at the limits of her power, against a being who was supposed to be utterly inferior. And they were seeing something that challenged everything they believed about strength and power, and what it meant to be a warrior. As the hours passed, David began to understand something important about the Queen. Vex was not fighting him to kill him anymore. She was fighting him to understand him. She wanted to know how a human could possibly survive this. She wanted to know where his strength came from. She wanted to know if there was something in the human spirit that transcended physical power. And David, though he could barely stand, though his body was broken in ways that should have been fatal, though every breath felt like pulling himself up from drowning, began to understand something about Vex. She was not just a warrior seeking conquest. She was someone who had been alone for so long, someone who had never met anyone who could challenge her, that she had forgotten what it meant to truly fight. As the 5th hour of direct combat drew to a close, David saw his opportunity again. Vex was not tired, but she was beginning to show the kind of caution that came from respect. There was a moment, just a fraction of a second, when she hesitated. She hesitated because she was beginning to wonder if she could actually lose this fight, and in that moment of hesitation, David moved with every ounce of strength that remained in his body. He used the same technique that had worked before, stepping inside her guard, grabbing her lower arm and this time twisting with such force that he brought her down onto her back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then David, gathering the last of his strength, placed his hand on her chest and held her down. His hand was tiny compared to her massive body, but the gesture was clear. He had won. He had defeated the Valorian Queen in single combat. The arena erupted in sound, but it was not the sound of anger or disbelief. It was the sound of Valorian warriors roaring with what sounded like admiration and respect. They had just watched their queen lose to a human. More importantly, they had just watched their queen lose to someone who refused to quit. Vex did not move. She lay on her back with David's hand on her chest, and she did not try to fight anymore. The queen who had ruled for 500 years and conquered 12 star systems remained motionless. Her patterns had stopped flashing through colors. Instead, they had settled into a soft white that David had learned to recognize as a sign of something that might have been grief, or might have been profound realization. The arena remained silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Nobody knew what would happen next. The ancient traditions of the Valorian people did not have a protocol for a queen who lost in combat. David was barely standing. His legs threatened to give out from under him at any moment. His entire body was covered in cuts and bruises that went deeper than bruises. He was pretty sure that several of his bones were broken and had healed incorrectly during the fight. His vision was starting to blur at the edges again, and he knew that if he did not sit down or lie down in the next few seconds, he was going to collapse. But he held his position. He kept his hand on the queen's chest, holding her down, waiting to see what she would do. Slowly, Vex raised her upper left arm and placed her hand over David's. Then, with a movement that was filled with what seemed like genuine respect, she pressed his hand against her chest harder. It was a gesture of submission. It was a gesture of acceptance. It was a gesture that the entire Valorian Empire was watching and understanding. Their queen was bowing to a human warrior. Their queen was acknowledging that David Morris was her equal, or perhaps even her superior. The crowd roared again, but this time the sound was different. It was the sound of warriors acknowledging the strength of another warrior. It was the sound of a civilization watching one of their greatest beliefs be overturned. It was the sound of change beginning to happen. Vex then did something that shocked everyone in the arena even more than her loss. She spoke, and her voice echoed across the chamber so that everyone could hear her words. She said that she had been wrong. She said that in her 500 years of life she had never been truly challenged before. She said that all of the battles she had fought had been victories of overwhelming force, and that she had mistaken that for true strength. She said that watching a human, a creature that her people considered physically inferior in every way, refused to quit and refused to break, had shown her something that no amount of conquest could have taught her. She said that strength was not measured in power alone. Strength was measured in will. Strength was measured in the refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. Strength was measured in something that humans seemed to understand in a way that the Valorian Empire had forgotten. David felt his legs finally give out, and he collapsed beside the queen. She caught him with one of her arms, holding him gently, and stood up. She lifted David into the air and held him up so that all of the Valorians could see him, and she spoke again, and this time her words carried the weight of a binding oath. She declared that humanity was no longer a target for Valorian conquest. She declared that Earth would be recognized as a free world and an equal partner in the galactic community. She declared that David Morris would be remembered as the first human warrior to defeat a Valorian queen, and that his name would be taught to Valorian children for the next 1,000 years. The crowd erupted in what could only be described as celebration. The Valorians did not cheer the way humans cheered. Instead, they made a sound like deep humming that resonated through David's bones and made his teeth vibrate. They stamped their feet against the ground, creating a rhythm that filled the entire arena with vibration and power. For the first time since he had arrived on this alien world, David felt like he was not witnessing a demonstration of Valorian superiority. He was witnessing a genuine expression of respect and admiration. Vex carried David out of the arena and into the medical quarters. She placed him on a bed and watched as the Valorian healers went to work on him. They used technologies that David did not understand to repair his bones and seal his wounds. Over the course of several hours, his body was restored to something close to its original condition. When he finally opened his eyes and was able to focus, he saw the queen sitting beside him. She told him that she wanted to make an offer. She said that she respected him too much to simply send him back to Earth without giving him something in return. She offered him a choice. He could return to Earth as a hero and a representative of the new alliance between humanity and the Valorian Empire, or he could stay with her. He could become her advisor and her partner in the process of learning how to rule through understanding rather than conquest. She said that she had been alone for so long, commanding fear instead of respect. that she had forgotten what it meant to have someone who could challenge her thinking and make her a better leader. David was silent for a long moment considering the offer. But he knew what his answer had to be. He told Vex that he had people waiting for him on Earth. He told her that humanity needed to know that their sacrifice had not been in vain. He told her that he would return to Earth, but he promised that he would establish communication between the two civilizations. He promised that they would learn from each other and grow together. He promised that this would be the beginning of something new for both species. Vex accepted his answer, though David could see that there was something that might have been sadness in her black eyes. She ordered that David be given a ship to return to Earth. She ordered that Karen and Marcus be released immediately. She made a recording that would be broadcast to every human on Earth, a message from the Valorian Queen herself, declaring peace and partnership and the beginning of a new era. As David prepared to leave, Vex performed a gesture that the Valorians reserved for their highest heroes. She placed her hand over her heart and bowed deeply, showing the ultimate respect to a warrior who had defeated her and changed her forever. When David returned to Earth, he was not a hero for a single mission. He was a symbol of what humanity could achieve through determination and will. The United Earth Coalition underwent massive changes. New treaties were formed with the Valorian Empire. Trade began. Scientific partnerships were established. And David Morris became the first human ambassador to the Valorian Empire, serving as the bridge between two civilizations that had nearly destroyed each other, but instead discovered that they could build something beautiful together. In time, Vex would visit Earth. She would walk on human soil and see human cities, and she would begin to understand that strength could take many forms, and that the most powerful thing in the universe was not the ability to conquer, but the ability to change.